Have you ever wondered why Native Americans preferred teepees, those cone-shaped tents, instead of regular houses? Most people think it's just because they were easier to build, but the real reasons are way more interesting and probably gonna surprise you. Some people today can barely handle moving once a year, right? Well, tribes like the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Blackfoot would have laughed at us. They were practically professional movers, and they didn't have to deal with shady moving companies or wrap their plates in bubble wrap. Now let's talk about the buffalo. Buffalo were like prehistoric, mobile food service, but constantly on the move. These massive herds roamed the Great Plains, and Native Americans basically had two choices: either follow the food, or go hungry. So what's the difference between building a permanent house and setting up a teepee? Back then, building a log cabin was like putting together IKEA furniture, but 100 times harder, and without a manual. Cutting down trees, hauling logs, fitting them perfectly into place, it could take months, and your back would hate you for it. And after all that work, when the buffalo moved on, you'd have to leave your house behind. A teepee, on the other hand, was basically the first pop-up tent, but way cooler. A skilled Native American family could pack up their entire home in under an hour, sling it onto 2 horses, and hit the road. Yeah, just 2 horses. Try fitting your own house onto 2 horses, I dare ya. Grinning face with smiling eyes. The real genius was in the design. Native Americans had basically invented what we today call a modular home system centuries ago. Every piece had a purpose, and if something got damaged, it could be swapped out easily. Poles were standardized, buffalo hides cut and stitched to fit perfectly. It was ancient engineering, plain and simple. Just imagine trying to haul a whole log cabin across the plains. You'd need an army of people, countless horses, and probably a miracle or two. Native Americans looked at it and said, nah, let's do this smarter. Let's talk numbers for a second. The average Native American family could completely take down a teepee in about 45 minutes, pack all their stuff, and be on the move. When they reached a new spot, they could set it back up in the same amount of time. So basically, they could move their whole home faster than we binge-watch a TV series. But maybe the most impressive thing, this nomadic lifestyle totally shaped the way they saw the world. It wasn't something they did out of necessity, it was a conscious choice. Their homes weren't just shelters, they symbolized a life that's constantly moving and changing. Now, you might be wondering why they didn't just cut down trees and build log cabins. Simple answer, there weren't any trees on the Great Plains. Yeah, finding a tree out there was about as hard as finding a smartphone in the 1800s. In some areas, you'd have to travel 50 miles just to reach a decent forest. Imagine getting mad today because you had to drive to another city for furniture. These folks didn't even have a car. Tribes like the Iroquois and Cherokee were way luckier. They lived in dense forests, surrounded by plenty of trees. That's why they could build longhouses and log cabins. But for the Great Plains tribes, it was a whole different story. The landscape was an endless sea of grass. Finding a tree was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Historical records show that before the 1800s, 30 to 60 million buffalo roamed across North America. Yeah, so many that you could see herds stretching to the horizon. And that's why Native Americans chose a nomadic lifestyle. For them, teepees weren't just tents, they were the smartest response to a life that keeps moving. At one point, there were more buffalo than people in most parts of the country, and these walking hardware stores had everything the tribes needed: thick, durable hides perfect for teepee covers. Fun fact, this might make your local Home Depot look a little less impressive. It took about 12 to 20 buffalo hides to make a good teepee cover. That might sound like a lot, but when you're living among millions of buffalo, it was basically an endless supply of free building material, delivered right to your doorstep. The process of turning buffalo hides into a teepee cover was actually pretty ingenious. Women in the Great Plains tribes were master architects and builders. They carefully cleaned and prepared each hide, then stitched them together using sinew made from animal tendons, nature's own thread. They were so skilled that the final cover was nearly waterproof. Try matching that quality with today's mass-produced tents. Good luck. Maintenance. A log cabin on the plains was like building a sandcastle and trying to keep it standing during a hurricane. Strong winds, extreme temperatures, and the lack of easy repair materials made maintaining a house a nightmare. A teepee made of buffalo hides, though, it was like a self-healing home. If one section got damaged, you just replaced that hide. No need to tear down the whole thing or sprint to the nearest forest. Remember, that could be 50 miles away. Great Plains tribes didn't just make do with what they had, they worked smarter. While other cultures struggled with the heavy labor and constant maintenance of log cabins, these tribes turned the most abundant resource around them, buffalo, into comfortable, practical homes. They practically invented the first sustainable architecture, and they didn't even need a degree to do it. But buffalo hides weren't just useful building materials, they were perfect for the harsh weather of the Great Plains. When it rained, the hides shrank and became even more waterproof. When it was hot, the hides expanded, letting in a breeze. The temperature swings out there were wild, and teepees could handle it like champs. If you've never lived on the plains, you're missing nature's craziest moods. One moment you're sweating like a sauna, the next you're grabbing your thickest blanket. A typical summer day could swing from 100 degrees Fahrenheit 38 degrees Celsius down to 50 degrees Fahrenheit 10 degrees Celsius. My aunt traveled from Florida to Nebraska with just shorts and a t-shirt. By night, she was regretting that. Wooden houses, total nightmare in that kind of heat swing. Think, an oven during the day with no AC, no insulation, gaps between logs, like living in a giant toaster, then a fridge at night. Comfort? Yeah. Forget it. And that's where the genius design of the teepee came in. Buffalo hide walls weren't just tough, they were smart. In the summer heat, the bottom edges could be lifted to allow natural airflow. If it got too windy, one side could be closed, too hot, the other side opened. Basically, a prehistoric thermostat. In winter, the hides were lowered all the way to the ground, with extra insulation at the base. Some tribes even added an extra layer of buffalo hide during the coldest months. Historical records show that even when temperatures dropped to -40 degrees Fahrenheit -40 degrees Celsius, people inside the teepee stayed surprisingly comfortable. Archaeological evidence shows that Great Plains tribes developed season-specific modifications for their teepees. Winter teepees usually had steeper pole angles so that snow would slide off easily. But the real magic came during those famous plains storms. Anyone living in Tornado Alley knows the wind doesn't mess around. It can flip cars and tear off roofs. But the teepee stood tall like a champ. Its conical shape was nature's own aerodynamic design. Aerodynamic engineering. Instead of resisting the wind like a flat wooden wall, the teepee let the wind glide around it. It's the same principle used in modern skyscrapers, but the Plains tribes figured it out centuries ago. Studies of traditional teepee designs show they could withstand wind speeds up to 70 miles per hour, 112 kilometers per hour, without breaking a sweat. Compare that to modern building codes, which usually require homes to withstand only about 90 miles per hour, 145 kilometers per hour, and that's with all our modern materials and engineering knowledge. Not bad for a primitive shelter, huh? Smoke flaps were another stroke of genius. These adjustable flaps didn't just vent smoke, they acted as a sophisticated ventilation system. By adjusting the flaps to the wind, families could control airflow inside the teepee with astonishing precision. It was like a smart home running entirely on common sense instead of electricity. Recent wind tunnel tests show that the smoke flaps created a low-pressure area above the teepee, helping the smoke rise and exit efficiently, a principle still used in modern ventilation systems. Rain. Teepees handled that too. The outer buffalo hides would naturally stretch when wet, creating a nearly waterproof cover. Any water that did get through would slide down the sloped walls instead of pooling like a flat roof. Meanwhile, people living in wooden houses at the time probably had to place buckets around to catch leaks, if they even had enough trees to build those homes. All this climate control was achieved without monthly bills or complex HVAC systems. With a self-regulating home like a teepee, who even needs a smart thermostat? Some people back then would probably have happily traded today's mortgage payments for a few buffalo hides. Early European explorers often wrote about how comfortable teepees were, even in extreme weather. Here's one example from 1851, a group of travelers sought shelter in a teepee during a huge thunderstorm. They were amazed to find it dry and warm inside, while their own tents had been ruined by rain. These structures weren't just survival shelters. They were sophisticated homes perfected over generations of trial and error. Even modern architects study teepee design principles to create sustainable buildings. Natural ventilation systems, passive solar heating, efficient material use. It seems our ancestors knew a thing or two about environmental engineering. When it comes to comfort, teepees were seriously cozy. First up, sleeping arrangements. Modern folks might think sleeping on the ground is awful, but for those who knew teepee life, that was completely wrong. Great Plains tribes had developed sophisticated bedding systems made from buffalo hides and soft grasses. These natural beds acted kind of like modern memory foam, they conformed to your body shape and offered excellent support. Archaeological studies even show that teepee dwellers had fewer back problems than their contemporaries living in wooden houses. The interior design of the teepee was also highly efficient. The average family teepee measured about 16 feet, 4.9 meters, in diameter and stood around 15 feet, 4.5 meters, tall. That gave roughly 200 square feet, 18.5 square meters, of living space, about the size of a modern studio apartment. But unlike cramped studio apartments with furniture in every corner, in a teepee, everything had a designated place, leaving the central area open for daily activities. Another surprising thing, teepees often had better air quality than most modern homes. The central fire pit and smoke flaps created natural airflow. The smoke didn't just rise, it drew fresh air in from the lower parts, creating constant circulation. This meant less dust, fewer allergens, and none of that stale, trapped feeling you get in closed-off houses. A 1960s study found that a properly set-up teepee had an air exchange rate better than many modern homes with central AC systems. Control wasn't just about survival, it was about comfort. Buffalo hide walls were incredible insulators. When properly processed, they created a membrane that was both breathable and weather-resistant. In winter, the air space between the inner liner and outer cover acted like double-pane windows, trapping a layer of insulating air. In summer, the same design kept the interior cool. Modern tests have shown that a well-made teepee can maintain a temperature difference of up to 25 degrees Fahrenheit, around 14 degrees Celsius, between inside and outside without any mechanical heating or cooling. But the real brilliance was in the details. Take the teepee liner, for instance. This wasn't just decoration, it was a sophisticated piece of engineering. The liner prevented rain from dripping down the poles. It blocked drafts. It created that insulating air pocket we talked about. It also acted like a reflective surface for the central fire, directing heat back into the living space instead of letting it escape through the walls. If my house were this efficient, my heating bill probably wouldn't give me heart attacks. Bugs? Teepees handled them too. Wooden log cabins were basically five-star hotels for every creepy crawly in the area. Gaps between logs were bug highways. Teepees were surprisingly insect-resistant. Smoke from the central fire acted as a natural insect repellent, and the tight-fitting hides didn't leave convenient entry points. Plus, unlike wooden structures, buffalo hides didn't attract wood-boring insects, no termite inspections needed. Acoustics inside a teepee were something special. The cone shape and soft walls created a natural amphitheater effect, making conversation easy while dampening outside noise. It was like having a built-in sound system designed by nature. Some elders who grew up in teepees mentioned you could whisper from one side to the other and be heard clearly. Try doing that in your echoey living room. The average teepee could be heated to a comfortable temperature with just 1/10 of the firewood needed for a log cabin of similar size. That's some serious energy efficiency. Maintenance was also way easier than dealing with a wooden house. No rotting boards to replace. No leaky roof to patch. No paint to refresh. Just regular smoke treatment of the hides kept them in good condition for years. But the true genius of teepees went far beyond just being a cozy place to sleep. Ask any real estate agent today what makes a perfect home, and they'll probably start spouting buzzwords like open concept and great flow. Well, the Great Plains tribes had that figured out centuries before HGTV was even a thing. Their teepees weren't just shelters, they were perfectly designed social spaces that brought families and communities together. The round shape of a teepee might seem like a simple design choice, but it was actually a stroke of social genius. Everyone sat in a circle facing each other. No corners to hide in. No separate rooms to retreat to. Just open space that encouraged conversation and connection. It's funny how modern offices are now spending millions to create collaborative spaces that basically copy what Plains tribes did centuries ago. Maybe they should have saved their money and just bought some buffalo hides. Archaeological evidence shows that the average family teepee was about 16 to 18 feet, 4.9 to 5.5 m, in diameter. That might not sound huge, but the circular layout made incredibly efficient use of space. Studies of traditional living patterns show that a family of 6 could live comfortably in this space. Try fitting that many people in a modern tiny house without starting a family feud. The layout was so efficient that anthropologists have found that Plains families typically spent more time in direct interaction with each other than their European counterparts who lived in rectangular homes. The central fire wasn't just for cooking and warmth, it was the heart of family life. Unlike European-style houses where fireplaces were stuck against a wall, the teepee central fire created a natural gathering spot. Everyone could see each other's faces in the firelight, making storytelling and conversation much more personal. Traditional stories tell us that this arrangement was specifically designed to strengthen family bonds. One elder's account from the 1800s described how children would learn their tribe's history and values just by listening to the adults talk around the fire each evening. The entrance of every teepee traditionally faced east, toward the rising sun. This wasn't just for practical reasons, like catching the morning light, it also created a standard layout that made every teepee in the camp instantly familiar. You could visit any family's teepee and know exactly where everything would be. Sleeping areas were always arranged in the same pattern, with parents on one side and children on the other. It was like having an unwritten floor plan that everyone understood. The social benefits extended beyond just family life. When tribes gathered for ceremonies or celebrations, teepees could be arranged in circles to create larger community spaces. The largest recorded teepee circles from archaeological sites show evidence of hundreds of teepees arranged in perfect rings. One famous site in Alberta, Canada shows the remains of a teepee ring that housed over 400 families. That's more people than you'd find in many modern apartment complexes. But perhaps the cleverest social aspect of teepee living was how it handled privacy. Even though it was one open space, Plains tribes developed sophisticated systems for creating private areas when needed. Simple hide screens could temporarily divide spaces, and the arrangement of belongings along the walls created natural boundaries. It was like having adjustable room dividers, except nobody had to pay for expensive sliding doors or partitions. The teepee's design was also perfect for growing families. When a young couple got married, they didn't have to save for years to buy their own home. They just needed enough buffalo hides to make their own teepee. These new homes could be set up right next to their parents' teepees, creating extended family groups that helped raise children and care for elders. No need for costly retirement homes or daycare centers. The social nature of teepee living even influenced how people stored their belongings. Everything had its place along the walls, but nothing was truly hidden away in closed containers or locked boxes. This open storage system made sharing natural and easy. Need to borrow something? You could see exactly where it was. This physical transparency promoted a culture of sharing and community support, something that many modern societies are trying to recreate through sharing economy apps and community programs. Another brilliant aspect was how teepees could be combined for larger gatherings. By simply rearranging the poles and joining the covers, 2 or more teepees could be connected to create larger spaces for ceremonies or big family gatherings. It was like having a modular community center that could be assembled whenever needed. No booking fees or rental contracts required. These incredible dwellings weren't just homes, they were the perfect balance of private space and community connection. Modern architects studying teepee design have been stunned by just how many social innovations were built into these simple structures. Visiting a teepee in the camp was instantly familiar. You could visit any family's teepee and know exactly where everything would be. Sleeping areas were always arranged in the same pattern, with parents on one side and children on the other. It was like having an unwritten floor plan that everyone understood. The social benefits extended beyond just family life. When tribes gathered for ceremonies or celebrations, teepees could be arranged in circles to create larger community spaces. The largest recorded teepee circles from archaeological sites show evidence of hundreds of teepees arranged in perfect rings. One famous site in Alberta, Canada, shows the remains of a teepee ring that housed over 400 families. That's more people than you'd find in many modern apartment complexes. And perhaps the most clever social aspect of teepee living was how it handled privacy. Despite being one open space, Plains tribes developed sophisticated systems for creating private areas when needed. Simple hide screens could temporarily divide spaces, and the arrangement of belongings along the walls created natural boundaries. It was like having adjustable room dividers, but without anyone paying for expensive sliding doors or partitions. The teepee's design was also perfect for expanding families. When a young couple got married, they didn't have to save up for years to buy a house. They just needed enough buffalo hides to make their own teepee. These new homes could be set up right next to their parents' teepees, creating extended family groups that helped raise children and care for elders. No need for expensive retirement homes or daycare centers. The social nature of teepee living even influenced how people stored their belongings. Everything had its place along the walls, but nothing was truly hidden away in closed containers or locked boxes. This open storage system made sharing natural and easy. Need to borrow something? You could see exactly where it was. This physical transparency promoted a culture of sharing and community support, something modern societies are trying to recreate with sharing economy apps and community programs. Another brilliant feature was how teepees could be combined for larger gatherings. By simply rearranging poles and joining covers, 2 or more teepees could connect to create larger spaces for ceremonies or big family events. It was like having a modular community center that could be assembled whenever needed. No booking fees, no rental contracts. These incredible dwellings weren't just homes, they were the perfect balance between private space and community connection. Modern architects studying teepee design have been amazed at how many social innovations were built into these simple structures. These teepees weren't just shelters, they were homes designed with purpose, efficiency, and community in mind. Every detail had meaning. From the way the poles were set to how the hides were stitched together, it was all engineered for durability, mobility, and comfort. The circle layout encouraged conversation and connection. No corners to hide in, no separate rooms to retreat to, just open space that brought families and communities together. The central fire wasn't just for warmth or cooking, it was the heart of family life. Unlike European-style houses, where fireplaces were stuck against walls, the teepee's central fire created a natural gathering spot. Everyone could see each other's faces in the firelight, making storytelling and conversation personal and engaging. Traditional stories tell us that this arrangement was specifically designed to strengthen family bonds. Elders recounted how children would learn tribal history and values simply by listening to adults talk around the fire each evening. Every teepee entrance traditionally faced east, toward the rising sun. This wasn't just practical, like catching the morning light, it created a standard layout. Teepees in the camp were instantly recognizable. Visiting any family's teepee, you'd know exactly where everything was. Parents on one side, children on the other, like an unwritten, universally understood floor plan. Social benefits went beyond family life. During ceremonies or celebrations, teepees could be arranged in circles to make large community spaces. Archaeological evidence shows massive teepee rings with hundreds of teepees, housing more people than many modern apartment complexes. The most clever aspect was how teepees handled privacy. Even as one open space, Plains tribes developed sophisticated ways to create private areas. Hide screens could divide spaces, and the placement of belongings along the walls created natural boundaries. Adjustable privacy, without expensive doors or partitions. Teepee design also supported growing families. Young couples didn't need years of savings to get a home, they just needed buffalo hides. These new teepees could be set up next to parents, forming extended family groups that cared for children and elders. No retirement homes, no daycare needed. Even storage promoted sharing and community support. Everything had a place along the walls, visible and accessible, fostering natural sharing and cooperation. Teepees could be joined for bigger gatherings, making modular community spaces on demand. No booking, no rental fees, just smart, flexible design. These dwellings were more than homes, they were the perfect mix of private space, social connection, mobility, and sustainability. Modern architects marvel at how these simple structures incorporated so many social innovations, centuries ahead of their time.